So once again, Tottenham have come from behind to snatch a draw, this time in the Champions League away at Bodo Glimt. So let's get straight into Bodo Glimt 2, Tottenham 2. So Thomas Frank made five changes ahead of this fixture from the team that struggled to get a draw against Wolves. Five players coming in: Pedro Porro, Kevin Danso, Papsar, Brennan Johnson, and Wilson Odobert, all coming into the team. There was some news that Christian Romero wasn't going to make the trip. I think that was sort of late, maybe Sunday, maybe Monday night, that he wouldn't make the trip. So that's the first game that he's missed for injury this year. Hopefully, it's only a minor knock because um, he's a key player for us. Obviously, a captain. He's going to be a key player naturally, but just in terms of the impact he has on the defense. Defensively, I don't think Danso is a bad defender. I think he's actually a really good defender. But one thing that was quite obvious was the difference when it comes to Spurs playing through the middle of the park. A lot of our build up over the past 18 months really has been done um, by Romero as a centre half purely because of how good his passing ability is out from the back. Um, and then looking at the other players to come in, a flat midfield three of Saar, Bentancur, Bergvall, which, if I'm honest, I didn't hate at all. And then front three of Brennan Johnson on the right, Wilson Odobert on the left, and Richarlison through the middle. So going into the game, we mentioned about Kevin Danso coming in for Romero. We really, really struggled to get any sort of foothold in the game in the first half and essentially to create anything really. It really feels like we didn't create that much. And it's a drum that I've been banging for the last couple of weeks about us needing to improve in attack. And these things will come with time. It's not even been 10 games of Thomas Frank's tenure yet. So a lot of the discourse following last night's result was essentially to do with the fact that with a more injury ravaged team last season, Spurs managed to beat Bodo quite comfortably. But I think it's an unfair comparison in terms of just saying, well, Ange won, so Frank must win, because that's just not how football works. Because there'll be results that Frank will pick up this season, which Ange definitely didn't last year because of how bad our league form was. But yeah, in terms of the first half, really, really poor. I'm okay with us being defensive and having good defensive structure. But when it gets to around 30, 35 minutes into a game, maybe approaching the 40th minute, and we've not really got out of our half, that doesn't seem sustainable to me. It really doesn't. Not in terms of long term, but the way that game was playing out, the more and more we're sitting back, the more we're inviting pressure. It's almost a little bit like that sort of um, the closing stages of that Super Cup game. Um, but yeah, we struggled. The only notable chance I can think of really in the first half for us was when Bergvall took it down the left. Really, really nice run and a beautiful outside of the football to Richarlison. It's one of them where, yes, he should have gone with his left foot, but in fairness, when you watch a replays, the ball, I wouldn't say it arrives late at Richarlison, but Richarlison's visuals of the ball coming to him were very delayed because of the defender they had in front of him. And by the time it dropped to him, it was almost sort of between his left and his right foot. So there wasn't, unless he, readjusted his whole body to get a left-footed shot away, in fact, we probably had to go with the right. And it was just a bit of a limp effort, but, it was a bit, I wouldn't say acceptable. Well, you can see you can see where the confusion lies with that chance is essentially what I'm trying to say. And um, I can't remember who it was on. It might have been Lucy Ward on the co-coms was saying this is not sustainable for Tottenham. They can't keep sitting back and inviting pressure and expecting nothing bad to come from it. And just before half time, the penalty. I'm trying to think who it was that gave it away now. I think it was Bentancur. Um, and yeah, the penalty, the striker I can say it now the game's over. He was absolutely crap. He really, really was bad. There's a lot saying about he's not scored this season, and then just when you think, maybe this is just normal Tottenham game, Tottenham comes along, gives them a penalty. The player who's not scored all season and has been largely guff for the entire first half gets a chance, and our luck was in because he absolutely cannoned it over the bar. And I don't know if it's because of the Super Cup, a bit of PTSD, but with Vicario, when I'm looking at him, and you know, he's a big lad. He's a very long bloke in terms of how long his arms and his legs are. So you'd think he'd really be able to make, penalties work to his advantage. And I know with penalties, the advantages are mainly geared towards the attackers rather than him, but I just didn't have any confidence that he'd get near it. Obviously, it didn't matter in the end because the ball went over the bar and we went into halftime at 0-0. But really, really poor first half. And something needed to change. There wasn't any changes at halftime, as far as I can remember. But then the game goes on, we're still sitting back, and then Peter Hauger, I think he's called, the one who was at AC Milan, back at Bodo, just scored an unbelievable goal. That unbelievable goal. Not the best goal you'll ever see, but just in terms of how quick it was to get to control it with his right foot onto his left, and then that whip to where your whole body sort of you can see him really channel all the power of his body onto that left foot to get that one away. And then not long after, we thought we were level through Rodrigo Bentancur, but the offside flag was up. That was disallowed after a VAR check, and then not long after, it was two. Jens Peter Hauger again with the goal. I thought he was one of their better players. I thought they looked a lot more compact and a lot more sharp. And I think this was the sort of Bodo team which we were getting warnings about going into the UEFA Europa League semi-final last year. Because last year I thought it was a pretty simple game, and I think eventually the quality shone through. But in a game where, look, on paper, it's a Champions League game, the second out of 8 league games. It's one that, isn't necessarily ride or die, you've got to win it. But those are the exact sort of games where I think teams that do go to Bodo are going to struggle. It's them games where on paper it's routine and, there's not a huge occasion. That's when I think the underdogs of Bodo, the Bodonians, will come out in full force. But yeah, 2-0, Jens Peter Hauger with the second. And then not long after, Mickey van der Ven leveling with, well, not leveling, getting us back in the game with his third goal of the season. Really good header. Really, really good header. He's wearing the captain's armband on the night. And that was a proper, like, captain's header. Just absolute power, doesn't care he's gonna jump into, who's gonna fall into him. Just getting his head on it, hard and low, past the keeper. And it was a great header, got us back in the game. And then the momentum was starting to build just a little bit more than we'd previously seen in the game. So with Spurs chasing the game, Thomas Frank made some subs. Xavi Simons come on, trying to add some much needed creativity to the team. Mohamed Kudus come on as well, and we're still chasing that goal. But Bodo really, really could have killed us off. I think they hit the post 2 or 3 times, maybe. Really, really impressive performance from them. And I think it's probably the sort of performance that we were probably expecting last year, but didn't really get, thankfully. But just in terms of the substitutions, I'm just trying to find them now. So you had Kudus and Xavi Simons both coming on the hour mark, and then João Paulinho coming on in the midst of the celebrations for Van der Ven's consolation goal. And then in the 8-second minute, we've seen Destiny Udogie and Archie Gray come in. And one thing which would really like to see is Archie Gray given these minutes in midfield. It feels like last year there was a lot of clamouring for, we've signed this £40 million midfielder. Yes, he can play right back, he can play centre back, but he's a midfielder. And there was some talk about whether, Ange didn't trust him there as an 18-year-old coming into, his first full season of top flight football. Um, but I'm not saying he's the solution to all of our midfield problems in terms of progressing the ball, but he carries the ball quite well. He picks the right passes. And I think that's something which, when you've got, you know, with Benton Corsa and Bergval, I thought that that's sort of fine for that game. I don't think it's terrible, but I was really impressed with Archie Gray when he come on. Look, don't get me wrong, he didn't come on and completely change the game, but we looked a lot more progressive in midfield than than we had done for the previous 82 minutes. And one thing which I think really highlighted our issues going forward, getting the ball forward through midfield was from goal kicks. Bodo would Their press was such a weird shape. They'd sort of have one striker on maybe the right centre back, and then there'd be like a bit of a 10-15 yard drop off where their attacking midfielder wasn't sure whether to mark the DM or to mark Van der Ven. And it just feels like if you had that player where they can play them simple balls which aren't necessarily a 70-yard pass or a killer ball which is going to split four defenders, just moving the ball through the middle. We didn't do that enough yesterday, and I think we've done it a lot more when Archie Gray come on. And I think Gray's done well this season. And I think if you look at the one game where we haven't really struggled against a low block, it was when Gray and Bergval started the first game of the season against Burnley. And look, I'm not saying that Archie Gray is going to be this player that comes in and plays every single game in the season and transforms our season because he's a midfielder like no other, blah, 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 blah. I'm realistic. I know that he's still 19. He still needs time to develop. Obviously, we're seeing him a lot more than than we were under Ange. And I think it's sort of by necessity had to put him in because of the lack of numbers last year. But, we played a full 90 against Doncaster, played the majority against Burnley, had a few sub appearances, and I think Frank's gently easing him in. And I hope that when it comes to around November, December, first of all, I hope that this midfield issue is sorted in terms of how we progress the ball through the middle with the personnel that we've got. But I hope that Archie Gray is in people's thinking a lot more when it comes to these team selections. Because at the minute, I'm not going to lie, personally, before every game when the team comes out, I'll try and guess what I think the team's going to be before looking at it. I never ever have Archie Gray in midfield. I don't really see him as, or at least I haven't, as, one of the players who would start these sorts of games. Obviously, the Doncaster game is a little bit of an anomaly, but I just think we've made a big investment, and Gray's done well out of position in the last year, and I feel like he's really gained credit in the bank. And Bergval, it took him 6 or 7 months to get used to England, and now he's flourishing. And I wonder if Bergval can do it. I'm not necessarily saying just because Bergval can do it, Gray can do it, but I definitely think he's worth considering in these sorts of games. Admittedly, when you look at our bench, he's not probably one of the ones that you look at and think he's going to change the game. He's going to open up this game. But I feel like he can be used and can become key in certain game scenarios this season. Games where, like Burnley, where you've got a team which is gonna sit back and they're not really gonna want to attack. I wonder if games like that might be a bit more suited to Archie Gray, but who knows? And then on to the equaliser, an own goal from I can't remember. I think it's Galveston who was playing for Bodo. By all means, not fit at all. By the commentary, I think he only come on for 6 minutes and managed to equalise for us. So cheers for that fella. And then Yeah, the VAR check was this with this was I'm not gonna lie, my head was absolutely on Mars. I was watching it and about 4 minutes, 4 minutes. If you're taking that long to decide if someone's offside or not, even with semi-automated offside, what are we doing? Why? We've got fourth officials, we've got VAR, we've got referees, we've got linesmen. If they need to go to VAR and they've got 4 or 5 other people in the VAR studio who saying, who are looking at these things as it's happening, why is it taking 4 minutes? And it was just as the 7 minutes went up for injury time, and it just completely killed all of the momentum in the game. Um, Not for Bodo, he did hit the post after that, but yeah, again, it's another disappointing um, performance, which you probably would say for Byron Doncaster. You'd say out of the last 4 games, it's not been good other than Doncaster. But I'm realistic. I know that Thomas Frank wasn't going to come in and change everything overnight. I don't think he'll do that. Players like Simmons, who yes, again yesterday didn't play amazing, need time to develop. Some players do, some players don't. Kudus looks a lot more assured than someone like Simmons, but I think Simmons might maybe need similar to how Bergvall did last year, where they needed quite a few months and quite a few bad games to sort of power through and break through that ceiling and start displaying some of their talents in English football. And look, it's one of them where no one's going to want to hear it, especially for a £60 million signing, a big marquee signing. When they don't get off the mark straight away or they don't quite click straight away, it could be very frustrating and people could be very reactionary. And I feel like the discourse that followed yesterday's game was quite reactionary in terms of people saying about Thomas Frank. And won that last season. He's a defensive coach, that sort of thing. I think the truth's somewhere in the middle. I think Frank could definitely coach attacking teams. We've seen that with Brentford in the Championship and the Premier League. And I, I look, performances aren't. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say performances have been amazing for the last few games because they haven't. But I trust in Thomas Frank in the tactical acumen of him. I don't. I personally would be surprised if we were to get to January and these issues are still happening and it's still bad football and we're not creating chances and that sort of thing. If that happens, then I'd be worried. Not completely worried, but quite worried. But I think Frank's got a lot of cards up his sleeve. Um, and sometimes it's just about finding, the right balance and things clicking. And I don't think it has this season really, other than maybe the first 2 games. But look, it's to come as a new manager. You think of all of the stuff that's gone on with Tottenham since winning the Europa League. And sacked, Levy's gone, Donna Cullen's gone. I think there's another one who went. Obviously, manager change, the whole Eze saga, the Gibbs White saga, Madison getting injured, all of this sort of stuff. And then it's brought us here. And with Spurs, there's always going to be noise. We're not a normal football club. We don't do things the normal way. We find the hard way to do things and we either get it done or we don't. And it's going to take time. It's a new manager, new ideas. And look, Thomas Frank's not here for 1 year. He's going to be here for a few years. So there's no point judging him based off of, you know, less than 10 games in what hopefully will probably be around a 50 to 60 game season with key players out like Madison and Kulusevski. It's just, it's not what people want to hear, but we're just going to need to be patient. And I trust Frank to get it right. Um, and yeah, on to Leeds United at Ellen Road, 12:30 on Saturday. And if you have been following Tottenham for a while, you will know 12:30 kickoff away to promoted side before an international break off the back of a bad result. that means one thing: Leeds United are going to turn us over on Ellen Road. And look, you can have Thomas Frank, Pep Guardiola, I don't know, Brendan Rodgers, Steve McLaren, Alan Kirbishley, whoever you want. Some things are inbuilt in football. And I can confidently say with my chest, we are not beating Leeds. And it's not down to anything tactical. It's just Spurs. It's just what we do. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be wrong and that we're going to be going into an international break. First 10 games of Thomas Frank tenure with just one defeat and hopefully another win. I'll be looking to see Archie Gray play. I really would like to see him play. Um, but yeah, I expect Matisse Tell might come in with Wilson Odegaard playing the full 90. Yeah, he did play the full 90. But yeah, let's see what happens. Um, and yeah, still unbeaten in the Champions League. And you never know with how this group works. That point could come round to be a valuable one when it comes to January and February. And we're discussing whether Spurs are in the playoffs, looking to get into the playoffs, or they've got that top 8 spot sealed. So that's my thoughts on Bodo, Glimt 2, Tottenham 2. And yeah, until then, I'll see you after the Leeds United game at Ellen Road, where we've hopefully just disproved everything that I've said and beaten Leeds United. And until then, the Spurs.